The studio lights burned bright, casting sharp halos around the polished wood of the round table. The atmosphere in the conservative political debate show was tense, but it was always tense. That's what the viewers wanted: fire, opinion clash. Yet, no one on set, not even the producers in the control room, expected the storm that was about to erupt between two high-profile guests. On one side of the table sat Caroline Leavitt, a fast-rising conservative commentator with a reputation for being unapologetically blunt. She was young, media-savvy, and never hesitated to turn a heated debate into a viral moment. Across from her was Cash Patel, a former Pentagon official and national security advisor, known for his reserved demeanor and razor-sharp understanding of foreign policy. He wasn't flashy. He didn't grandstand. He spoke with the weight of experience, and that made him dangerous in any verbal sparring match. The topic that evening was America's evolving relationship with India and how it intersected with national security. For most of the segment, the conversation had followed familiar lines. Leavitt argued for a more isolationist stance, pushing the idea that America's alliances often drained resources and invited unnecessary risks. Patel, calm and methodical, countered her points with surgical precision, referencing years of intelligence collaboration, defense strategy, and the growing importance of Asian alliances in a world increasingly shaped by China's influence. The audience was hooked, but the tension was building. As Patel finished explaining the strategic implications of limiting ties with India, Leavitt leaned forward, clearly frustrated. Her voice sharpened like the edge of a blade. "Well, maybe," she said, lips curled in a smirk. "If people like you were more focused on protecting America instead of promoting your homeland, we wouldn't be in half these messes." For a full second, the entire room went dead silent. The kind of silence that falls when someone says the unsayable, not because it's legally wrong, but because it crosses a moral line everyone knows instinctively. The host's eyes widened. The panelists froze. A producer coughed nervously off camera. Even the camera operator hesitated, unsure whether to zoom in or pan out. Cash Patel didn't flinch. He stared across the table at Caroline, his face calm, expression unreadable, but his eyes were different now. No longer the quiet analyst. They were cold, focused, steel-hard. When he spoke, his voice was low, steady, but unmistakably strong. "Are you suggesting I'm less American because of my skin color? Or because of my last name?" he asked. Leavitt didn't respond. She tried to interrupt, but Cash continued. "I was born in Garden City, New York. I served this country at the highest levels of defense. I've risked my life for this nation's security. And if you think my heritage disqualifies me from being patriotic, then maybe you're the one who needs to reread what it means to be American." A sharp intake of breath rippled across the panel. The host attempted to pivot. "Okay, let's bring this back to the policy." But the damage was already done. Millions of viewers watching from their homes had already felt the shift. This wasn't just a disagreement about foreign policy. This was a cultural lightning strike on national television. In the control room, someone hit the cut to commercial button, but the feed didn't switch quickly enough. The audience saw Leavitt's face flush red. They saw Patel's gaze hold steady. They heard the murmurs from the production crew and caught the stunned silence that had descended like a curtain on the studio. By the time the network finally faded to black, the internet had already lit up. Within minutes, hashtags like #GoBackToIndia, #PatelSpeaks, and #Caroline Leavitt began trending across Twitter and Instagram. Viewers flooded social platforms with clips, reactions, fury, and praise. Some defended Leavitt. Many more rallied behind Patel's quiet defiance. And so, with a single exchange, just one unscripted, emotionally charged moment, America was no longer just watching a political roundtable. It was watching a reckoning. By the time the broadcast returned from commercial break, the tone of the show had shifted. What was supposed to be a lively discussion on foreign policy had evolved into a cultural and political firestorm. The host, visibly rattled, attempted to steer the conversation back to the intended topic, but the energy had changed. Cash Patel remained poised. Caroline Leavitt, still flushed, now looked tense and uncomfortable. She avoided his gaze, clearly aware that her words had crossed a line that couldn't be rewound. Behind the scenes, the network's executives were scrambling. Phones were ringing off the hook. Social media managers watched as clips from the live broadcast were shared at lightning speed. Commentators from both ends of the political spectrum began reacting in real time. Conservative talk radio hosts were stunned. Liberal analysts were outraged. Independent voices called it a moment of national clarity. And the American people were listening. That night, #Cash Patel became the top trending hashtag on every major platform. News segments replayed the moment on loop, analyzing every inflection, every pause, every glance. But it wasn't just about what had been said, it was how Patel had responded. Calm, controlled, decisive. In an era dominated by shouting matches and sensationalism, his measured response cut through the noise like a bell. The impact was immediate and widespread. Civil rights organizations issued statements applauding Patel for standing firm against racial insinuation on live television. Veterans groups, both left and right-leaning, voiced strong support for Patel, citing his years of service and unwavering commitment to national security. Even prominent conservative figures, those often aligned with Leavitt, publicly distanced themselves from her remarks. Senator Tom Reynolds tweeted, "Disagreement is part of democracy. Racial insinuation is not. Cash Patel deserves respect, not suspicion." In the days that followed, Patel received invitations from nearly every major news outlet. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and even late-night hosts wanted him to appear. But he declined most. Instead, he posted a quiet, powerful video from his home office. No dramatic lighting. No flashy production. Just a man sitting in front of an American flag, with a framed photograph of his immigrant parents on the shelf behind him. "I was born and raised in this country," he said, voice steady. "My parents came here legally from India, worked hard, and taught me the value of integrity and service. I chose to serve in national defense not because I was seeking glory, but because I love this country. Not for its perfection, but for its promise." He paused, then added, "When someone tells me to go back to India, they're not just insulting me. They're insulting every immigrant who took the oath of citizenship, every soldier of color who wore the uniform, and every American who believes that patriotism isn't defined by your last name, but by your character." The video went viral instantly. Within 24 hours, it had over 25 million views. Celebrities, politicians, military veterans, and thousands of everyday Americans reposted the clip, calling it everything from a masterclass in grace under fire to the most American thing I've seen in years. Meanwhile, Leavitt was facing growing backlash. At first, she issued no apology, only a vague tweet that said, "Sometimes tough conversations get heated. I stand by my beliefs." But that did little to calm the wave of criticism. Donors began pulling back. Speaking engagements were canceled. Her media appearances dried up. Even staunch supporters were hesitant to defend her. 2 days later, she released a written statement. "My comments during the recent debate were taken out of context. I did not intend to offend Mr. Patel or question his loyalty to the United States. I regret that my words caused offense." But the statement fell flat. Americans weren't interested in damage control. They were looking for accountability and authenticity. And while Leavitt appeared to be scrambling to protect her career, Cash Patel was unintentionally becoming a national symbol. He didn't ask for it. He didn't campaign for it. But his response, his demeanor, and his story had tapped into something far bigger than a single TV moment. This wasn't about political correctness. It was about patriotism, identity, and what it truly means to belong in the country you fight for, work for, and love. And America was watching. The reverberations from the televised confrontation didn't fade, they intensified. In the weeks that followed, the exchange between Caroline Leavitt and Cash Patel became more than just a trending moment. It became a national reckoning. Americans across the political spectrum were forced to confront a question that had lingered beneath the surface for years. What does it mean to be American? For some, patriotism had long been wrapped in the imagery of traditionalism, flags, English surnames, a certain type of narrative. But Cash Patel had shattered that mold not by shouting, but by speaking with quiet conviction. In a country increasingly divided by outrage and identity politics, Patel's voice emerged as something rare, a unifying force born from grace under pressure. Veterans halls across the country began inviting him to speak. He attended one in Columbus, Ohio, an unassuming auditorium filled mostly with older veterans and blue-collar workers. As he stepped up to the microphone, a hush fell over the room. "I'm not here to talk politics," he began. "I'm here to talk about who we are as Americans. Because I've stood in war rooms, in desert bases, in secure facilities deep beneath this country's soil, and I've never once been asked what my heritage is. I've only ever been asked, can I trust you?" The crowd stood in unison. Applause broke out, not because of political agreement, but because they recognized the authenticity in his voice. In a time where most public figures spoke in platitudes or posturing, Cash Patel delivered something else entirely: truth without bitterness, confidence without arrogance. Meanwhile, Leavitt's image continued to suffer. A documentary-style video began circulating online, contrasting her remarks with Patel's calm rebuttal and subsequent statement. It wasn't just political operatives pushing the narrative, it was citizens. A veteran in Texas edited a short film titled The Real American that featured Patel's story. It garnered millions of views in a matter of days. Students in high schools across the country debated the event in civics classes. Teachers used it as a case study for media literacy, patriotism, and racial bias. And perhaps most striking of all, immigrant families, especially Indian Americans, began holding community forums centered on Patel's response. They weren't interested in victimhood or outrage. They were inspired by resilience. One young girl in California, just 13, stood up at her local temple's youth gathering and said, "I used to think someone like me couldn't represent America. But now I know I can." Patel took notice. Though overwhelmed with messages and media requests, he started replying to these young voices personally. "If we let hate define who belongs," he wrote to one boy in Chicago, "we've already lost. But if we let love of country guide us, no one can take that from us." As for Caroline Leavitt, she retreated from the spotlight. Her attempt at a political comeback 6 months later was met with tepid applause and pointed questions. The stain of that one moment, those 13 words, had become too large to scrub clean. And while her defenders insisted she had simply misspoken, the public had already judged the moment for what it was: a mask lifted too quickly, revealing something too ugly to ignore. In contrast, Patel rose not as a partisan hero but as a civic voice. He wasn't campaigning for office. He wasn't selling a book. He simply embodied what millions of Americans had been longing to see: decency under fire. His story reminded the nation that the most powerful form of patriotism wasn't about yelling louder. It was about standing taller. And just like that, a moment meant to undermine him had instead transformed him into something else entirely: a symbol of modern American identity. Years from now, people may forget the exact date of the debate. They may not remember the network, or even the topic of discussion. But they will remember how a single sentence, aimed as a jab, was turned into a mirror, reflecting the fractured state of national discourse and the potential for something better. Because in the end, Cash Patel didn't just defend himself. He reminded us all what it means to stand for something.